How do you know you are playing well at poker when there is so much short-term luck? Well, you have to know the signs to look for. In this video, I lay out 5 things that ensure that you are playing good poker. These are the things that crushers do to consistently earn their living. And if you want to win just like them, watch this video and start doing these 5 things. So coming in at number 5, we have maneuvering well in medium-sized pots. So people often like to analyze how did they play in the big pots, right? The big hero calls, the big bluffs, the fancy check raises. But I can assure you the biggest part of your win rate are these medium-sized pots that come up over and over again. And how well do you perform in them? Are you trying to extract thin value at every opportunity? And do you consistently make the play that is the highest EV? Let's dive in with this first hand in a 3-bet pot out of position.
We got 7-8 suited in the cutoff. Definitely going to bump this up. Unfortunately, we get 3-bet by the button, so we do not end up with position. And our hand actually performs fairly well against a 3-betting range. Closing the action, we have a good hand to crack some of the big pairs. Very little domination when we do hit our hand. So I think this is a pretty good hand to defend. He should actually be checking this board back a decent amount, but some players won't, because this hits our range a lot harder. Yeah, instead he bets 25. And with pair and gutter, I don't think we have any choice but to continue here. The question is, can we fold a guy off an overpair in these games? I mean, he's going tiny again. He's giving us such good price. It feels like he's inducing. I think our hand is good enough to just call. And we'll see if he bluffs it all in or not. And we pick up a nice pot against ace-king. Now that we know a player is betting medium strength hands like that on the turn and flop when he should just be checking back, I think we're going to check raise more often, both as a bluff, but also for some equity denial with a hand like that wants to fold out overcards. You know, that hand like that works pretty well as a bluff when we're deeper because it has, you know, blockers to the straight, blockers to, you know, set of sevens. It just didn't feel like at that depth the player would fold an overpair. So I didn't see a reason to, you know, turn it into a check raise bluff. We got king of clubs, jack of clubs. I'm definitely going to be raising this. See if the squeeze comes in like it has been. She's been very, very active as a squeezer. I think our hand in position is good enough to call. And we flop top pair. And she goes small. I don't really see a reason to raise here. Just call. Keep her bluffs in. She checks. This is actually a nice hand to check back and induce some river bluffs. Potentially we can go for value if it's checked to us on the river. I mean, as played, we're never folding this on the river. If he checks, and now I think we have to go for value. I think like a 2/3 sizing works well here. Try to get called by pocket queens or a 10. And she lets it go. Ace of clubs, queen of clubs in the cutoff. Some big hands to start here. So definitely going to open. Let's see what type of action comes back to us. He does make the call. So we flop middle pair. Very favorable board. I think this is a good spot to check back, strengthen our checking range. You know, we could take a small bet size on this flop and just kind of go linear and bet a lot of things. Yeah, I think we can call here. It's betting very small. Actually, I think this can raise some of the time. Yeah, now that the ace arrives, jack 10 gets there, flush draws get there. I no longer think a worse queen is going to call us on this river, so I'm just going to check back. And yeah, we did pick up a little bit of extra value from Queen X there.
So wrapping up that last hand, I do think it's important to sometimes run hands by a solver for another perspective. We're not going to take this as gospel, but it can point us to certain things. And so, you know, you can see that in the cutoff, of course, we are raising with our ace queen offsuit as expected. We get a call from the big blind. We get a king of hearts, queen of diamonds, deuce of spades board. In this case, we decided to check, as mentioned, to bolster the checking range, and then we get the king of spades turn, which is an interesting card. Our opponent now leads very small, and I have them leading 1/3 pot here. You can see that this is a line that is rarely taken for this size on this board texture. It's like less than 1% of the time. And when it comes back to us and we have ace queen offsuit, we certainly could call, and that is the main line here. But I think for a bet this small, we should at least consider a raise, which is also an option that's indicated here. Now, just because the solver does this less often does not mean that it's a lower EV play. It just means that the equilibrium in play involves more just calling with the ace-queen offsuit than re-raising it. The problem I see is that people just never find this raise. It's not that they're missing it once in a while. It's that they're literally never doing this and they're always calling. And to vary our play, it's important to sometimes raise and extract value, especially against a bet this small when our opponent can have a lot of weaker queen X and a lot of draws. All right, so coming in at number 4, we have losing the minimum. Sometimes hands do not go as planned. Sometimes we have a hand that looks strong on the surface, but then the run out kills our action, and it's important to adjust to the new information in play. I have a hand here that I'm going to show you where things really get turned upside down, and we wind up with a hand that appears strong on the flop, turns into essentially a bluff catcher on the river, and we wind up losing the minimum.
We got queen jack off in the straddle. And can defend for sure, closing the action, and so we will. And we flop bottom 2. I think this hand plays really well as a check call down. I think check raising would be a bit too thin on this board, so we're just going to call here, use it to strengthen the range we have with a lot of weaker king X that could be calling here, our flush draws, or pair plus draw. Of course, we can't fold here. Of course, this is like the nut low river as the backdoor gets in. Player has an ace. They've now made a straight. And so lo and behold, they back into, they were never folding at any point. They had the nut flush draw. They turned a pair. So plenty of equity for that player as well. But yeah, I think our hand was played fine there. Just kind of got the nut low river.
So some people may watch that hand and think to themselves, well, that was fairly straightforward. I wouldn't go wrong in that spot. But I can assure you that so many people make a mistake, especially on the flop, by, getting attached to their hand strength and getting excited that they have 2 pair, but essentially overplaying the hand. Right? It often comes from recreational players that, are excited they have a 2-pair hand. They see that the board texture is wedded, connected, and they don't want to be outdrawn. And it's very easy for them to overplay the hand with a check raise, suddenly trying to get the hand all in unnecessarily. And too often they end up, against a straight or a set or just a much better hand. And so when a hand cannot be played that fast as a check raise and it can't stack off at a certain depth, it usually belongs in a check calling range, which really strengthens that range. It gives us some strong hands that may not be good enough to play for stacks, but can at least check call down on a blank runout and keep our opponents honest. Well, in this case, unfortunately, we didn't get the blank runout, but if we had, our opponent could have potentially made a bluffing mistake on the river with a missed nut flush draw, which we would have snap called, and we would have been happy that we hit a hand this strong in our checking range that could comfortably check call down. So coming in at number 3, we have well-timed bluffs and semi-bluffs. And we're just not always going to have it in poker, as you know. Sometimes we have to take a hand and push it a little further and get our opponent to fold a better hand, as we likely did in the hand I'm about to show you. It's a hand where we have good blockers, we have a favorable flop texture in a 3-bet pot, and although on this turn card we may often check a big portion of our range, we do have one of the few hands that can continue barreling.
We're going to 4x raise the button with our ace-queen offsuit on the left. And she makes the call. King 4-8 board. This is not a double Broadway board. A lot of people will bet 1/3 here. I actually think half is going to play better to put a little more pressure on medium pairs in her range. Things like 9s through jacks. And I think we can put a decent amount of pressure on 9s and 10s with flush blocker. Straight draw as well. And we do get the fold. I think a hand like 9s or 10s, maybe 8x, laid it down to us there. A nice pickup from, just kind of semi-bluffing, playing our range.
So coming in at number 3, we have adjusting to game dynamics. It's one of the things that poker crushers do especially well. And I'm going to show you 3 hands against the same opponent where there's kind of a progression in what happens, which leads to a decisive third hand.
Look down at the beautiful 5 of hearts, 6 of hearts in middle position. And we've got a player raising, and he's raising a bit wide. This is kind of a marginal 3-bet, but I want to play pot in position against this guy with a deceptive hand. And especially somebody opening this wide. Of course, we get the cold 4-bet jam behind us, and no choice, getting 5-1 to call this and hope we outflop this guy. We stack this player with our 5 of hearts, 6 of hearts. What a nice pot. Keep it in mind in spots like this when that type of thing happens. If anybody's been paying attention now, our 3-bets probably aren't going to get quite as much credit as they did before. So just want to be mindful of that and maybe anticipate some light 4-bets now. All right, we look down at ace of spades, 4 of spades in the cutoff. We've got same player that's just opening a bit too wide, and he did just see us 3-bet him a bit light with 5 of hearts, 6 of hearts, but I think our hand performs pretty well here, and we'll see if he adjusts and starts 4-betting us lighter now that he's seen that. We've got, yeah. So now that he's seen this type of thing, we could have just folded here. Wake up with big slick in the big blind. We've got a limper. We've got our aggressive friend over here to the right. He's been playing very loose. We've been 3-betting him very often, and I don't see any reason not to do that here. Hopefully he 4-bets us like he has been. This time he just calls. 10, 10, 8. Been very, very aggressive. We don't want to c-bet here and get blown off our hand. I think our hand can check back some of the time. Yeah, our hand can go for some protection, I think, against a range this wide. It's going to be very hard for him to check raise us as a bluff now. Well, he does. He goes for the insta check raise. We're going to call this. Now he checks back immediately. I don't think we're getting this guy off a pair here. And it turns out we have him beat. Very weird spot.
And you can see how that was a natural progression. At first, he saw me 3-bet him with a 5-6 suited. Then he adjusts, likely, he may have had a strong hand in that second hand, but we don't know. He easily could have adjusted by 4-betting light once he saw what I did and once the player had cold called. And then in the third hand, once we had this aggressive dynamic already built up, it leads to him overplaying a medium strength hand like ace jack that probably could have been used to just, check call a couple times. Instead, he check raises it, he gives up the river. It's not a play that we should use with a hand like that. Instead, you should be a little bit more polar, using things like, of course, quads and full houses, but also things that just have way less showdown value. Like perhaps if he used like a jack 9 suited or a jack queen suited, something that really would put pressure on my good ace highs and get better hands to fold, as opposed to using a hand like that was already beating a lot of my, low suited aces and hands of that nature. And lastly, coming in at number 1, we have Value Town. And in a session that goes your way in poker, sometimes you have to catch a couple breaks and hit a couple big hands. That's what happens in this segment, and I show you how to make the maximum with the hands in play. Now, it's important that sometimes when your opponents are getting ready to punt off their stack, that you do not get in the way. So I see this all the time when a player is excited that they have a big hand, their opponent is barreling off into them. It's inevitable that the money is going to get all in, and then the player just raises for some reason. And the problem is, it gives your opponent an opportunity to not only, potentially make some exploitative folds with value, but to give up on his bluffs. And in spots where it's ensured that the money's going to get all in, making these unnecessary raises can really cost you a decent amount of money. So sometimes when you are the punt returner on a football team and a player is getting ready to punt, you just wave the fair catch sign and you just catch the ball. That's essentially what happens in these two hands.
And we wake up with jacks over on the left. Definitely going to be 3-betting. Nope, nobody opens, so we're going to just raise to our standard 2.5x open, using a little bit of a smaller size in the straddled game. So we just have a little more room to play post-flop. We get called by a short stack. Now we get the squeeze from the straddle. This hand could call, it could sometimes 4-bet. I think calling in position is just fine. And we flop middle set. Always a nice feeling. I think it's important here to not fast play. We're just going to have a lot of like ace 10 suited here, ace queen suited, a lot of medium strength hands that do not want to raise. And we want to give our opponent a chance to blast off with his bluffs, to overplay ace king. He's going 110, and now we of course we're going to stack off here. Yeah, so I mean, he gets it in basically drawing dead. But if we raise the flop, maybe once in a while he makes an exploitative fold, and we don't want to give him the opportunity to do that. So we just call. It's important to note that, that was a low SPR environment, a low stack to pot ratio environment. So basically, there's not a lot of money left behind. And when that's the case, you want to do a lot more slow playing, a lot less raising. You really don't need to raise to get all the money in by the river. You would want to raise your set in a spot where stacks are very deep. The pot is not that big yet, and you really want to build that pot to get all the money in. We've got an open ender down here in a limp pot. I think we can have some raises here. If we're ever going to raise, I mean, this is one of our very best semi-bluff raises that we have on this board. We get re-raised by the player behind. Our hand has too much implied odds to fold now. We do hit our hand. We're going to check, see what they do. Probably have a very strong hand or a strong draw. And obviously we're going to snap call this. Probably beating two pair, and we are. Player just went absolutely bonkers with just one pair for some reason, and table breaks. Hey, we broke the game. Look at that. Everybody quit. Not a bad way to sign off.
All right, so always nice to end off on a good note, essentially breaking the game with stacking a player that I don't really know what he was thinking to re-raise a weak ace on that board. And then I'm not sure what he was putting me on, because in a spot where I call a raise, if he was thinking, well, he probably has an open-ended straight draw, so let me charge him. Well, the draw just got there on that card. So that wraps up the 5 signs that you are playing well in poker. If you'd like to go deeper and find some additional ways that you can improve your game, we are offering a monthly membership. Check it out here. You can trial it for 7 days for free. PTO Poker Monthly Membership. It's a great mix of private coaching, digital content, and a welcoming community that I know you will love. We will ensure that you are playing your best game and that your results don't ultimately come down to luck, that you find these things that we discussed in the video to be at your very best, just like the Crushers. I hope you'd enjoyed it, and if you did, please subscribe for more content just like this.